Scanning for audio.
Hello and welcome to a Tin Dog podcast. This time, another special interview with someone you may or may not have heard of, Mr. Kenny Smith.
Hello there.
Hello, it's good to have you here.
It's very nice to be here.
Now, there are some people out there who may not have heard of you, and obviously they're scum, but let's just educate them. Let's just educate them in the way of who you are. So, Mr. Kenny Smith, what is your connection and why do I have you here at the risk of quoting a certain other podcast?
My name is Kenny Smith, and I am the editor of Vortex, the magazine of Big Finish Productions.
Oh, you see, now that is a very nice thing. And of course, it's free. You don't have to be a subscriber. You don't have to be somebody in the know. You can just turn up on the website and download it and get basically a free Doctor Who magazine.
And there's about 88 of them available at present.
I know. It's fantastic. Now, you've not always been in charge of Vortex.
No, I've not.
Paul Spragg was had your seat, let's put it that way, for a very long time. And then you ended up stepping up and taking over.
I did. It was I had been involved with Vortex for a couple of years beforehand, doing effectively the archive column. As newspapers would often have it, they look back on what was happening years ago, and with Vortex I would look back on previous releases, like Scherzo was the very first one we did, and I did a number of those over the years. But my sort of indirect involvement with Big Finish began back in the year 2000, as I had been really enthused by the audio plays. Then when 2001 came round with the release of the first Paul McGann season, that really got me all excited. That was New Who. That was the only new Doctor Who being produced with the actors. And I was so excited, I ended up doing a fanzine which was called the McGannzine. And that looked to the first McGann season. So you've got Storm Warning, Sword of Orion,
Stones of Venice,
and Minuet in Hell, and featured the making of those stories. Got in touch with various writers and actors, just off my own back, got in touch with them, did the interviews, and pulled it all together with some lovely unseen images, cover roughs, things that had never been seen before. And at that point, there didn't seem to be any outlet for them. So it was quite a fun thing to do. In my day job, I'm a newspaper reporter or newspaper editor, actually, now. I keep forgetting I get these promotions. And it's applying my whatever skills I have in my day job to a lifelong interest.
So that McGann zine evolved into the BF zine?
It became the finished product. I wanted to try and I like to try and get a pun in there if I can. So with the Big Finish aspect to it, became the finished product. The first issue was out in May 2001. Then they got really good reception. I originally planned it just to be a one-off. And then back in, let me have a quick check as I remove it from my shelf. Issue 2 of what I just renamed it as the finished product, made it issue 2. That came out in January 2002, featuring a host of interviews with the likes of Sylvester McCoy and Gareth Thomas, and a host of the writers once again.
So obviously, I've got quite a few listeners who listen to Big Finish, let's put it that way. If anyone wanted to get their hands on these, because obviously you can get all 88 of the Vortexes, but if anyone wanted to get their hands on these things, can they get them as PDFs or anything?
At the moment, I only have very rough PDFs. I really should go back and, for want of a phrase, digitally remaster them. I've got a few print issues left, but not a lot. But so if anybody wants to get in touch, they can drop me a line. Be more than happy to try and help them out if there's any they want.
Would that be via Twitter? Go for it. Email address.
You can get me on Twitter. Excuse me. I'm on Twitter at Finished Zine. Sorry, my vocal cords are going all funny. It's been a long day. At finished product. No, it's not. It's at finished zine. And my email is thefinishedproduct@hotmail.co.uk. Please don't try and send me junk or sell me stuff, because I'll just delete you.
But consider yourselves warned. Well, I was going to say,
exactly.
You're a reasonable man. You'll punch them. That's fine.
Exactly. I'm Scottish. That's what we do, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. I'm not quite sure it is. I'm from Newcastle. I'm the midpoint between the English and everyone else. Yep. Yes. Right. So, you say you've got a full-time proper job as the editor of the Daily Record.
Oh, no, it's not the Daily Records. Oh, God, no. Can I just clarify? I am not the editor of the Daily Records. No, I'm the editor of the Ayrshire Post, which is part of the Daily Records and the Daily Mirror group. The Daily Record is effectively the Scottish version of the Daily Mirror.
Right.
For those of you down south and internationally, you've probably heard of the Mirror. After all, Ace does read it in Silver Nemesis episode 1 to get the football scores. Yes, I'm the editor of the Ayrshire Post, which is actually quite fortunate for me, because one of the people from our circulation area is Miss Jenny Colgan. So I've done quite a few stories on Jenny over the last year or so in my time at the paper, not just about her Doctor Who stuff, about her novels as well, but of course when it comes to her Doctor Who things, and especially Big Finish, then, well, sometimes you've really got to force yourself to do some stories, haven't you?
I know. It's as if the universe had fitted into place perfectly for that. Well, Jenny was our last big interview over on our little show. And it was a lot of fun. It really was. She's
fantastic. She really is brilliant. I love Jenny. But my wife's called Jen as well, so if she hears this, then she can assume it was her I was talking about.
Oh, that's terribly wise.
Yes, but also I'm quite lucky in my previous job. I was editor of the Rutherglen Reformer newspaper. It's the hometown paper of Robbie Coltrane, Midge Ure, and also Andrew Smith. So I'm quite lucky with where I've worked with having Doctor Who connections.
I must admit, that's pretty impressive. You'll be able to do that. So, obviously you seek out your Doctor Who things, but you get that only because you've got passion. So, Jenny Colgan had this theory that everyone born 1972-ish has a certain bit of Doctor Who running right through them like a piece of rock. So I'm guessing you're around that age?
I was born in 1974 on June the 19th, so it's my birthday next Sunday. Please, everybody, email me some nice Twitter greetings or email me some electronic birthday cards. I like cards.
It's always good to ask for cards. It really is.
Absolutely. Even e-cards, I accept them. Feel free to include gift cards and gift vouchers if you like things that I do. You don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly. You know what? You're completely
That's always
right.
been my policy. That was my policy with the finished product. If you don't ask, you don't get. Barnaby Edwards said when he was casting the first series of Eighth Doctor and Lucy stories that his policy was not to say no on somebody else's behalf, let them say it for you. So I've kind of adopted that as my own policy, and it seems to have worked quite nicely. You don't ask, you don't get.
You see, so getting back, 1974, born, which I'm guessing means that your Doctor's kind of the back end of Baker, mostly the Fifth Doctor.
Yeah, I was born 11 days after Tom Baker became the Doctor from at the end of Planet of the Spiders episode 6, which was broadcast on June the 8th that year. So I'm a child of Tom Baker, and yes, he was mainly one of my earliest memories is watching the Invasion of Time episode 6 and the Doctor wheeling out K9 Mark II in his cardboard box. That is genuinely one of my first memories. I've got vague memories of something which I think might be Image of the Fendal, but I've never quite been able to find the bit that I remember. But then again, as a man once said, the memory cheats. But yes, I became a real proper fan from I suppose I remember Key to Time from just Androids of Tara onwards very clearly. Mary Tam's costume in particular, I can't think why.
No idea.
And then
no idea whatsoever.
And absolute diehard viewer from City of Death onwards, which I remember watching when I was in primary 1.
I must admit I also have distinct memories of that mask coming off at the end of episode 1.
Oh, who doesn't? It's absolutely a moment for an era. I mean, you look at it now and obviously it's perhaps slightly flawed, but at the time it's what the image it conjures up in your own mind. You can twist it, distort it in whatever way you like, and it's fantastic.
I was at my grand's house, sitting on the floor about 6 inches from the screen, and trust me, everything's frightening when you're that close to the screen.
That's probably why I've got really bad eyesight now.
Let's leave that there, shall we?
Yes, quite.
Right, now, because you've obviously got massive background in journalism, and you do this other Vortex business on the side. A couple of questions linked with that, but have you ever wanted to cross the line and become a Big Finish writer? You know, become a fiction person rather than someone who reports reality.
When I was at school, I think as we all do, we all write loads and loads of stories, and I have got about 1,001 in my head. My big problem is finding time to do it. As with Vortex, on top of the day job, I can roughly work out what I'm doing. Usually on a Saturday night, if my wife's watching Britain's Got Talent, The X Factor, Strictly, stuff like that, which I'm not particularly that bothered about unless it's to make snide comments, particularly in The X Factor and Nick Grimshaw and his lack of abilities. Personal opinion, of course. It doesn't reflect Trinity Mirror policy. Be able to work it as time. Finding time to do stuff is my big issue, really, because I've got a wife and a daughter of 10, so spare time is precious, and it's be able to accommodate and allocate it is really what's done. But yes, to answer your question, I have loads of ideas.
Right.
But it's finding the time to do it.
Well, that's completely... So I totally understand what you're saying there. Right. So you've been interviewing people. Now, the problem is, for me, when I'm reading the Vortex, I'm going, this guy's got another job. How is he getting to interview all these people? And he's going to, because sometimes on your Twitter feed you're travelling up and down the country to interview people on certain recording days. So,
well, actually, I'm not always doing that because most of my interviews are done over the phone or by email. I've only ever it's an impression people have got, and I take it as a compliment. But I've only ever been at one Big Finish recording day ever. I was at Domain of the Voord episode 1 and 2 recording, thanks to an invite from Andrew Smith, who got me down to do a feature when I was working at Rutherglen in the Rutherglen Reformer. And since then, I've not actually been back in the studios.
That's a shame. Well, I know that some people at Big Finish listen to this podcast, so let's put, like you said, if you don't ask, you don't get. This man would like to attend a recording session. Let's see if we can do that. Let's make this dream come true. Yeah.
Absolutely. Always nice to go. It's just fitting in with the schedule. But yes, I have been invited to others, but I just haven't been able to make it fit with around my day job and my holidays and such like, because I'm up in Glasgow, so it's obviously not so easy just to nip down to London at the drop of a hat.
Oh, and just in case anyone from Big Finish is listening, I live a lot closer to the recording studios, and I also haven't been to a session either. Can't see that happening either.
Policy passing off there. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Exactly. Now, I've had a quick look at your Twitter feed, and I couldn't help but notice, are you a Zeroid owner?
I am. I have a Sergeant Major Zero football. I got him back in, 1984, 1985?
It was 85, yeah. I've got one as well.
And, oh, God, there's two of us.
It's a very deflated thing in the bottom of a basket somewhere at my parents' house, but I know it exists.
Yeah, I have to say, I love Terrahawks. I think anybody who's read my Vortex editorials will have noticed that I kind of like Terrahawks. I mean, one of my big pleasures when I was growing up was that series. When I discovered last year, just by chance, Jamie Anderson mentioned that Jeremy Hitchin, who played Zero, or who now plays Zero, he didn't back then, Sergeant Major Zero, for those who don't know, Tiger Neinstein, Hawkeye, and a host of others. He now lives in Edinburgh, so I went through and had an interview with him in his kitchen. So I was speaking to Mr. Hitchin in the kitchen and had a great time. But also it was one of those occasions where I thought, this is actually quite a good story from a newspaper point of view, because sometimes I'll come across things that I'll think, actually, that might work in a newspaper sense. And with Big Finish's blessing, of course, I will always check. Yeah. And they were quite happy with me to do an extra wee bit with Jeremy and then pass it on to the Scottish Daily Record. So if you do a Google search for Jeremy Hitchin Daily Record, you should be able to find it. And it was an absolute blast. I read it back, actually, just by chance a couple of weeks ago. And I think that my inner geekiness comes bouncing out like a Zeroid.
Another thing that I noticed on your Twitter feed is that, and I don't want to, alarm any of the listeners at all here, but you're a football fan.
Yes,
you are one of the very small bit of the Venn diagram where it crosses between football fan and Doctor Who fan. And
that is true. I'm a fan of Aberdeen Football Club. I have been for a very long, long time. For those who are not interested, I'll keep it brief. Aberdeen Football Club were the greatest team in Europe in 1983 after we won the European Cup Winners' Cup, which is a big trophy. Then we beat the winners of the European Cup, which is an even bigger trophy. So therefore, my team were the best team in Europe in 1983. Hooray!
It always intrigues me when I come across. I mean, Neil Perriman's been introduced to football very late in life, and he's now a gigantic fan from a fellow sort of podcaster's point of view. But for me, I never got it. There was a
Doctor Who and football are so similar in so many, many ways. You've got your own team, who are obviously the goodies, the Doctor and his companions, against the bad guys. And effectively, you're watching your Doctor. Effectively, it's like the Seventh Doctor being in charge, manipulating, getting his pieces in place to defeat the bad guys and win. See, that's my way of looking at it. And also, there's 11. Once upon a time, you did have 11 Doctors. You could have put them in a team. And I suppose if you include the War Doctor
you've got a substitute, yeah.
Yeah, and the 12th Doctor, you've got subs. Although these days you can have 3 subs, so you could throw in the Balyard as well if you want, but he'd probably not work. Sorry, it's not a very good analogy at all. I apologise.
It's fine. No, I think analogy should be stretched as far as you could go and then just go a tiny bit further. And then
it was tenuous to start with, but there we go.
Oh, that's exactly right. So, now, I must ask you this. You've obviously got to know what's coming with Big Finish. How tempted are you to tell other members of the We about what's coming?
Well, to be honest, I don't. That's one of the things with my day job. Quite often I will come across information that isn't quite ready to go into the public domain, and therefore I'll sit on it, which happens in the day job until it's the right time for it to go. And with Vortex, as we're speaking today on the 8th of June, I'm actually just before we started chatting, I've been working on stuff for the September issue on the War Doctor box set number 3, Agents of Chaos.
I simply cannot wait for that. The last 2 have just been wonderful.
I've read the script for one of them, and I think you're going to like it.
Well, I must admit, the output just keeps getting better, and I do not know how they're keeping doing it. Because you sit there and you listen to something and you go, This is superb. This is fantastic. How could you get better?
Yep.
And then the next one. I mean, just for example, this month. I mean, you've got the Two Masters. You've got the Trouble with Drax, and you see, and you've got Survivors as well. Which I'm having to pace myself when listening to Survivors, because it's just so incredibly harrowing, and it's you can't just have a binge listen to Survivors unless you're sitting in a park surrounded by people who are all happy and playing on a swing or something.
Well, maybe you should watch an episode of EastEnders and then listen to some Survivors to cheer you up.
Yeah, let's do that. That would work. Just in general,
it's a great series. I mean, I'm quite lucky because with my drive to work, I've got about a 50-minute drive every day to work, and then 50-minute home. So I've got a great chance to do listening then, and a wee catch up with everything that's been released. So yes, that's another benefit of the job, particularly in lovely sunny days like this.
Indeed. On looking at my bookshelves just across the room, on the bottom shelf, because that's where the very big books are kept, there's a gigantic tome written by your good self, which is the Big Finish Companion Volume 2. How come you did Volume 2? Did you sort of step in, or...?
Well, that came about after Richard Dinnick had written Volume 1, and Richard's workload increased dramatically. At that time, I think he was doing an awful lot more writing. Of course, he's now writing for things for CBeebies and such like, and he's travelling all over the place. So his workload increased, and I was asked by Big Finish producer David Richardson if I would be interested in doing Volume 2. Of course, they were aware of what I'd been doing with the fanzine, so they were they knew that I could write to whatever extent people think I can write, which was a real compliment, and I was given the chance to pull that together. So I was given a list of what to do and went ahead and wrote, as I'm a hideous overwriter, and I get far too much material. It does actually come in handy sometimes for listen again for Vortex now, so I can go back and find new old interviews, or is it old new interviews, if that makes sense? You know what I mean?
Value-added material. Oh, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's added deleted scenes and such like equivalent to print. So yes, it came about that way, and it was a good 8 or 9 months I spent writing that, because I had to listen to every play in the book, which I think there was about 196.
Something like that. It's pretty impressive, yeah.
And then had to do a 300-word synopsis of each, and then speak to the writers, get trivia and such like, and pull it all together. So, yes, it was it was a labour of love. It definitely was, and it got a bit difficult towards the end, as my mum was diagnosed as being terminally ill. So, and Big Finish were fantastic about it. I cannot thank them enough, as I let them know that my mum was ill, and they said, "Don't worry about the book. Come back to it whenever you're ready." So it was actually quite therapeutic latterly, because that's what sort of took my mind off things and gave me a bit of focus again to get going, which was fantastic. And I owe Big Finish a lot for that, because it definitely pulled me through a very tough time.
Well, yeah.
I get all serious there. I don't often do that.
No, it's not a problem. Well, we won't hold that against you. So,
thank you.
At the risk of making things worse, any sign of a volume 3?
Well, that would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, I must admit, because it finishes at it finishes some time ago now. If you at
45, I think is where it stops. That issue release number 115. So yes, if there was a volume 3, that would just be lovely, wouldn't it?
Well, it would be useful as well. But
yes, indeed, there has been a fair bit of output since then.
There has. I mean, I realised the other day that there's a release every 3 days. It's quite an output from any company to be able to produce something of such quality that often.
It is. It's quite incredible. I mean, I take my hat off to people, especially the likes of Matt Fitton and John Dorney, who are the stuff they're writing is incredible. They're doing so much, and it's so good. It's quite a talent. And I've just picked those two at random. There are loads of other writers who are doing such a great job as well.
Everyone listening to this knows exactly who you're talking to.
You know what I mean? Yeah. That was just an EG, not that they're the only ones.
No. I must admit, there must be spreadsheets galore going around saying what's coming out when and things being moved around.
I don't get to see those, which is quite good, because my eyes would probably just go blah, blah. It'd just be too much.
Well, I must admit, it's been an absolute charming. Can I just say that again? So, it's been really good getting to talk to you and finding out a little bit more about what you do. So, Kenny Smith, thank you for joining me on the Tin Dog Podcast.
You're very welcome. Thank you for listening, everybody.
Okay.
And thank you for your time, Michael.
Okay, thank you. On the 3rd of September 2016, Hooverville 8 will be with us. Possibly the friendliest convention in the whole of the UK. This year's guests include, but are not limited to, Kai Owen from Torchwood, Michael Jason from Doctor Who, the Valeyard himself, Katie Manning, Joe Grant, Eric Sayward, Sophie Aldred, good old Ace, and Matthew Dale. For more information and to book your ticket, visit the Derby Quad website, www.derbyquad.co.uk, derbyquad.co.uk. That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.